She was a respected teacher, until a student accused her of making white kids feel guilty. By morning, her classroom door was locked, and the school called it routine maintenance. Her emails vanished. Her lesson plans deleted. No one would say who ordered it. Then came the footage. Students laughing as she knelt in front of them, trembling. But the video they leaked was edited, and the truth they cut out could destroy the entire school board. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The first thing Ava Johnson noticed when she pulled into the parking lot of Sterling Heights Middle School was how clean everything looked. Not just clean, manicured, rehearsed. The hedges were trimmed to uniform perfection, the asphalt untouched by a single oil stain, and the American flag billowed in a breeze that felt too intentional. A place that didn't allow mistakes. A place where masks were worn as tight as smiles. She sat in her car a moment longer, gripping the steering wheel like it was a life vest. Her palms were damp. For a fleeting second she thought about backing out and driving away, but that wasn't her. Not Ava. She hadn't survived underfunded districts and passive-aggressive interviews to walk away now. This job was supposed to be the breakthrough. Sterling Heights was one of the top-ranked middle schools in the state. Parents lobbied to get their kids in. Teachers rarely left unless they retired. The salary was generous, the benefits elite. But what Ava really wanted, what pulled her here like gravity, was the chance to shape young minds in a place that claimed to care about character and leadership. She adjusted her beige blouse in the mirror, checked her braids, and whispered, "Let's make them see you." The front office smelled like money and lemon disinfectant. A receptionist with frosted blonde hair and an overly wide grin looked up from her computer. "You must be Miss Johnson," she said, not offering a handshake. "Welcome to the Sterling family." Ava nodded. "It's good to be here." As she walked down the corridor, the walls told a story. Gold plaques, championship banners, oil paintings of past principals, every face white. It didn't escape Ava. She clutched her bright teal notebook. A simple thing, but a burst of color in this monochrome world. She passed students in crisply ironed uniforms. Most were white, a few Asian, and barely a handful black. Still, she smiled. She didn't come here to feel comfortable. She came to make a difference. Her first meeting with the faculty confirmed what she already suspected. Out of nearly 50 teachers, she was the only black woman, and one of only 2 black staff members, the other being Coach Darnell, who avoided eye contact and left quickly after the principal's welcome speech. Principal Whitaker greeted her with thin enthusiasm. "We're very pleased to have you," he said, his smile so forced it seemed surgically applied. "I know you'll bring unique energy to the team."
Unique? That word again. She was used to it by now.
In the staff lounge, someone laughed at a joke she didn't hear. A white teacher named Mrs. Klein turned to her and said, "Just wait till you meet the parents. They'll love you. Our school has a real diversity push this year." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. Ava just nodded. By the end of her first week, she'd already memorized most of her students' names. That mattered to her. Names were roots. And in a place like this, she wanted the kids to feel seen, especially the quiet ones in the back who flinched when she called on them. Some of the students were genuinely curious about her lessons, especially her creative writing prompts, which invited personal storytelling. But there was an undertone Ava couldn't shake. The subtle mimicry of her voice when she turned her back. The girl who asked if she ever taught at a school where people had teeth. The boy who told her he thought black people were more into sports than English. She kept smiling. She corrected the misconceptions. She redirected the ignorance into learning moments. It was what good teachers did. Still, some comments stayed with her long after the bell rang. Ava started staying late, trying to build rapport with the other teachers. She volunteered to help with the school play. She brought extra snacks to share in the lounge, but most of them kept their distance. They weren't overtly rude. They just didn't see her. Or rather, they saw what they wanted to. A symbol, a checkbox, a face for their brochures. In private, she sometimes found herself whispering, "It's just the beginning. Keep showing up." But the cracks were growing. One Monday morning, she wore a deep green jumpsuit, with gold accents, a nod to her African heritage, elegant yet professional. As she walked the halls, she caught 2 8th-grade girls whispering, "She's really going all Wakanda today," one said. They giggled. Ava didn't confront them. Not yet. At lunch, a male teacher, Mr. Fielding, commented, "You always look so festive. He said it with a chuckle, not expecting a response. She gave him one anyway. It's called culture, she said evenly. You should try learning about it sometime. He blinked. No offense meant. None taken. She lied. That Friday, Ava had her first parent-teacher night. Most parents were polite, guarded, and clearly surprised to see her. One father kept glancing down at her wedding ring finger, then asked if she had children of her own. Another mother asked where Ava went to college, then followed up with, "But how did you end up here?" One parent, though, stood out. A biracial girl named Kiara brought her mom, a quiet woman who locked eyes with Ava and simply said, "Thank you for being here." Ava felt something stir, recognition, perhaps even relief. Maybe she wasn't entirely alone. For a few weeks, Ava pushed through the tension. She focused on the kids who responded, the students who stayed after class to ask questions. She ignored the parents who raised eyebrows when she corrected their children. She kept grading, kept teaching, kept hoping. Her teal notebook grew thick with notes, small victories, student breakthroughs, and also troubling patterns. A boy who rolled his eyes every time she spoke. A girl who always refused to sit in the front row because she talks too loud. Another teacher's lesson plan mysteriously duplicated hers after she'd shared it in the staff drive. It was death by paper cuts. And Ava, while smiling through each day, was bleeding slowly. Then, one morning she unlocked her classroom early. She liked to prep before the building got loud. The lights flickered on. The air felt off. As she turned to the whiteboard, she stopped. There it was. A stick figure drawn in thick black marker. Kneeling. A chain wrapped around its neck. And underneath, written in bold red, "Ms. Johnson." Her heart stopped. The marker dropped from her hand. The room was silent. But her ears roared. The drawing wasn't just cruel. It was deliberate, personal, and public. This wasn't a student acting out. This was a message. A warning. Ava backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the grotesque caricature. Every lesson plan, every smile, every extra hour she gave to this place, none of it mattered. Not to them. They didn't see her as a teacher. They saw her as property. As Ava reached for her phone to take a photo, she heard footsteps behind her, and the voice of the vice principal, sharp and suspicious. "Miss Johnson, what are you doing in here so early?" The voice from the shadows haunted Ava all night. They did it to her too, but she didn't fight back. "Are you going to?" She hadn't seen who it was. Just a silhouette slipping between the stacks like a ghost. The librarian claimed no one else had been in that section. But Ava knew what she heard. And now it echoed in her chest like a dare. The next morning, Ava showed up early again, hoping to reclaim a sliver of normalcy. She poured herself a coffee in the lounge, using a cheap paper cup now that her mug had been shattered. She kept her eyes down as she stirred in cream. Mrs. Klein passed behind her and muttered, "Still coming in early? That's dedication. Or desperation." Ava didn't respond. Instead, she took her coffee and disappeared into the staff bathroom down the hall. The one on the second floor where hardly anyone went this early. She locked the door behind her and leaned against the cold tiled wall. Then, without warning, the tears came. They weren't delicate or cinematic. They were violent. Full-body sobs that seized her from the inside out. She pressed a fist to her mouth to muffle the sound. Her shoulders shook. This wasn't like her. She didn't cry at work. She didn't cry for strangers. But the pressure had built too high. Microaggressions, silences that screamed louder than slurs, children repeating hate disguised as jokes, and the quiet complicity of adults who knew better. And now the image of that desk, wiped clean by someone who hadn't even cared enough to pretend to understand. Her mother's voice whispered from the memory banks of her childhood. "Ava, never forget some places smile with knives." Back then she thought it was just bitterness talking. Trauma, perhaps from another time, but now she knew. Her mother had been warning her about places that looked clean and polished on the outside, about institutions that hid racism behind policies, behind polished mission statements and diversity pamphlets. Sterling Heights wasn't the exception. It was the blueprint. Eva sank onto the closed toilet lid, coffee forgotten beside her. She stared at the beige stall walls and whispered through clenched teeth, "You're not going to break me." When she finally stood up, her face was blotchy and her throat raw. She stared at herself in the mirror. Eyes too tired, skin too tired, soul too tired. But she straightened her spine anyway. If they wanted her gone, they'd have to drag her out. Not just out of the classroom, but out of her calling. From that day forward, she began documenting everything. Every passive comment, every vandalized item, every inappropriate joke. She wrote them all down in her teal notebook, now rebranded as a journal of truth. She gave it a new name on the inside cover. Evidence. The pages filled fast. Sep 12 student mocked my pronunciation of February and called it Blackuary. Sept 15, lesson plan erased from shared drive again. Sept 16, parent asked if I taught real literature. She included timestamps, names, and even drew small sketches to mark emotion. The day she nearly cried again, she drew a droplet beside the entry. Her notebook became armor, each word inked with quiet defiance. A week passed with no major incidents, and Ava dared to hope that the worst had passed. Maybe her documentation had spooked someone. Maybe they'd realized she wasn't backing down. On a breezy Thursday morning, she stopped at the coffee shop before work and picked up a new mug. It read, "You can't silence me." She didn't smile when she bought it. She wasn't being cute. She was stating a fact. When she reached school, she took a deep breath before unlocking her classroom. The sun filtered in through the tall windows. Desks were arranged just as she'd left them. A few papers fluttered on her desk from the breeze coming through the cracked window.
Then she saw it.
At first she thought it was a smudge, but as she stepped closer, the word came into focus, carved deep into the polished wood of her desk. The N-word. Etched. Not written, not drawn. Etched. Someone had used something sharp. Something deliberate. The letters were jagged, angry, permanent. Ava couldn't breathe. It was different this time. The drawing on the board had felt childish, ignorant. This felt violent, intentional, like someone wanted to mark her, scar her space, break her. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She took photos from every angle, then backed up and took wider shots, just like she'd read in trauma documentation guides. But even as she moved with purpose, her body felt numb. Her skin burned, her throat was dry, and her ears again filled with that roaring sound she now recognized as silent rage. She walked straight to the office. Principal Whitaker wasn't there yet, so she found Vice Principal Kimball again. He blinked as she showed him the photos. "Well, that's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" she said. "I mean, terrible. Absolutely. But we can't really prove who did it. Kids come in and out of rooms all day. I lock my room. Every night." He hesitated. "Still, unless we find someone with a knife, you're not going to check the security footage. There's a camera in the hallway, not in the classroom itself, and even then, the angles might not show much." Ava stared at him. "So you're not going to investigate?" "We'll look into it," he said. But his eyes said otherwise. "Maybe you should consider working in a shared space temporarily. You know, for safety." She walked away before she said something she couldn't take back. Back in her room, she stared at the desk. She didn't sit. She stood, silent, for several minutes. Then slowly, she reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a large sheet of paper. With a marker, she wrote in bold block letters, "This space will not be silenced." She taped it right over the carved slur. "Let them see. Let them know." But just as she stepped back, she noticed something else tucked under the chair behind her desk. A folded sheet of notebook paper. She opened it. 4 words, printed in messy block letters. "You'll be next too." As Ava turned toward the door in stunned silence, a small voice spoke from the hallway just outside her classroom. "Ms. Johnson, I think you're in danger." The voice in the hallway startled Ava so sharply she almost dropped the threatening note. "Ms. Johnson?" It was soft, hesitant. She turned quickly, heart still racing, and saw a small figure standing just beyond her classroom door. Kiara Simmons, 7th grade. Shy observant, the only biracial student in Ava's homeroom. Kiara stepped forward, backpack clutched tightly in front of her chest. "I think someone's planning stuff. Against you." Ava blinked. "What do you mean?" Kiara hesitated, chewing her lip before whispering. "Some of the 8th graders said you were gonna snap soon, like on camera, that they'd make sure you did." Ava's breath caught. She knelt slowly to Kiara's level. "Did they say who?" Kiara shook her head. "They just said Project Crack, like it was a joke." The phrase hit Ava like ice water. Not just a cruel plan, but a premeditated performance. "Thank you for telling me," Ava whispered. "You did the right thing." Kiara gave a tiny nod, then darted away before Ava could ask more. She closed the door behind her and sat down heavily, her gaze drifting to the spot where the slur had been carved. A sick realization settled in her chest. This wasn't just random bullying. It was theater, and she was the chosen target. The next 2 days passed like walking on broken glass. Every sound, every glance, every murmur in the hallway twisted Ava's gut. Her classroom no longer felt like hers. It felt like a set, and she had no idea when the curtain would rise. She kept her voice even, her movements composed, her expressions unreadable. She documented everything. She reported Kiara's warning to Vice Principal Kimball, but he dismissed it lightly. "Kids talk," he said. "Let's not make something out of nothing." She left his office with a familiar knot in her throat. The moment came 2 days later.
Third period.
Eva was sitting behind her desk after the bell when she noticed something odd. Students whispering more than usual. Some were trying to hide smirks. Then a boy at the back, Logan Trent, raised his hand. "Yes, Logan," Eva asked, cautious. "Did you cry when you saw it?" he asked, voice syrupy with faux concern. The class tensed. Some laughed under their breath. Eva inhaled slowly. "We're not discussing that. But I just want to know," Logan pressed. "Because I think it's important to talk about feelings." The phrase dripped with mockery. Another student stifled a snort. Eva stood. "Enough. Let's begin today's lesson." But her voice cracked, barely, but enough. Enough to cue another round of quiet laughter. Then it happened. Another girl, Taylor, suddenly stood up from her desk. "Ms. Johnson," she said, raising her phone. "Do you think people get too offended these days?" Eva froze. Taylor didn't wait for a reply. Because like some people can't take jokes, even if they're funny. More phones appeared. Eva's eyes widened. "Put those away." Taylor didn't move. "You are overreacting again. Put them away. Now." But her voice wasn't firm. It was strained. She was unraveling. And they knew it. That's when Eva snapped. Not in the way they hoped. Not with shouting or rage. But with silence. She walked over to the whiteboard, erased the warm-up prompt, and wrote in large, shaking letters, "What is humanity without empathy?" Then she turned to the class, eyes wet but voice calm. "You want to know what breaks a person?" she said softly. "It's not the names or the slurs. It's the silence from the people who see it and do nothing." No one laughed. No one smiled. Just the quiet hum of cameras recording every word. "You can try to turn me into a spectacle," she continued. "But one day, you'll remember this. And you'll realize it says more about you than it ever did about me." Then she sat down. She didn't speak for the rest of the period. She knew something had happened the moment she stepped into the lounge later that day. The room quieted. A few teachers stared at her. Others looked away. Mrs. Klein muttered, "Well, I guess that moment finally came." Eva kept walking. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a notification. "Unhinged teacher melts down in class. Watch the video." Her stomach turned cold. She clicked the link. What she saw made her heart cave in on itself. A choppy, edited clip barely a minute long. Her voice distorted, her tone exaggerated. Out of context. Only the trembling, the silence, the words, "You want to know what breaks a person," followed by a tight zoom on her moist eyes. No slurs. No provocation. No build-up. Just Ava, looking emotional and unstable. The captions added fuel. She literally started crying in class. "Is this who's teaching our kids?" Within hours, the video had gone viral on local social media pages. Facebook groups lit up. Parents commented, "Disgraceful. She needs therapy, not a classroom." Where's the professionalism? What happened to strong role models? Another diversity hire gone wrong. Some were worse. Screenshots of her Facebook profile were posted. A thread started dissecting her hair, her clothing, her accent. She was no longer Ava Johnson. She was a meme. At home that night, she sat on the edge of her bed staring at the screen. Her inbox was flooded with messages. Some supportive, many not. Subject lines read, "You should be ashamed. Leave before you ruin more kids." Not everything is about race. Her phone rang. She didn't answer. It rang again, and again. She turned it off. The next morning, she showed up early anyway. She stood in her classroom, alone. She placed the "You Can't Silence Me" mug back on her desk and stared at the chair where Taylor had stood. Then she opened her notebook, evidence, and added a new entry. Sept 28. Video leaked. Edited to remove context. Framed as breakdown. Admin silent. She closed the book, took a deep breath, and waited for her first class. At 11:13 a.m., her email pinged. Subject: Emergency School Board Meeting. Attendance: Required. Admin: Parent reps, faculty leadership. She scrolled. Her name wasn't on the invite list. No mention of her. No request for her presence. No opportunity to defend herself. But she'd been made the headline. The face of the scandal. And now they were discussing her future, without her voice in the room. Just as she closed the email, the classroom phone rang. She picked it up. A voice she didn't recognize said calmly, "They've already decided, Miss Johnson. They're just figuring out how to spin it." Ava didn't say a word to Vice Principal Kimball as he stepped into her classroom. She simply turned her phone screen toward him. The image of the stick figure kneeling beneath her name glowing back like a neon scream in the morning light. He blinked once, then let out a soft, rehearsed laugh. "Well, that's not exactly appropriate, is it?" He leaned in, hands on his hips. "Probably just a kid being edgy. You know how middle schoolers—" Eva stared at him. "You think this is a joke?" He shrugged, already walking toward the board with the tissue. "We'll clean it up. No need to overreact." As he scrubbed the marker off, Ava's heart tightened. The red ink smeared like blood. The chain drawn around the stick figure's neck took longer to fade. When he finished, he tossed the tissue in the trash and turned back to her with a hollow smile. "Let's not escalate this. Things like this can spiral quickly, especially these days." "Right," she said, the syllable dry in her throat. She sat through the rest of the day with a knot in her stomach. Her classroom, once her sanctuary, now felt haunted. She scanned every face too long, flinched at every laugh she couldn't decipher. In fourth period, a boy in the front row coughed a word under his breath, something low and ugly. She couldn't quite hear it, but the three boys around him snickered, all eyes on her. She continued the lesson, hands trembling behind her desk. After class, she walked to the staff lounge. A few teachers were seated around the lunch table, passing around someone's homemade cookies. Mrs. Klein looked up as Ava entered. "Oh, honey, you look stressed," she said. "Let me guess, rough crowd this morning." Ava hesitated. "Someone drew something inappropriate on my board." Klein's eyebrows lifted. "Ooh, was it about you?" "Yes." "Well," she said, sipping from a glittery pink tumbler, "at least you're getting noticed." The others laughed. Ava didn't. A few days passed. Ava tried to regain control, mentally, emotionally, professionally. She leaned harder into her lesson plans. She called on more students. She played jazz during independent reading, and started a weekly journaling challenge called Your Voice Matters. The first week, only 6 students turned in entries. One wrote, "You talk like you think you're better than us. No name sign." She found it folded on her desk the next morning. Subtle attacks began surfacing like bruises beneath the skin. One afternoon, Ava entered her classroom to find her carefully arranged materials tampered with, books pulled from shelves, chairs misaligned, her printed vocabulary posters crumpled and tossed under a desk. When she reported it, Principal Whitaker offered a lukewarm response. "Maybe consider locking up next time. Sometimes the janitors leave doors propped open by mistake." But Ava knew. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was a message. Still, she pushed through. The students' whispers got sharper. During one lesson on American literature, Ava asked for their thoughts on Langston Hughes. A white girl with blue braids raised her hand and said, "Is it okay to say the N-word if it's in a poem?" The class went quiet. Ava responded with grace, as always. "No. Context doesn't make it less harmful." Another boy mumbled, "So much for freedom of speech." They laughed again. Ava didn't. In the staff lounge, kindness came laced with sugar-coated condescension. One day, Mr. Fielding leaned over to her and said with a crooked smile, "You're very articulate, you know. It's refreshing." Eva turned slowly. "You mean, for a black woman?" He raised both palms. "Hey now, don't twist my words. I meant it as a compliment." "I'm sure you did." He chuckled and walked away, muttering, "Touchy." Later that afternoon, her coffee mug, ivory ceramic with the word hope etched in silver cursive, was found in pieces in the teacher's sink. No one claimed to have broken it. Another Monday morning, Ava logged into her classroom desktop and froze. All her lesson plans were gone. Weeks of slides, documents, custom assignments, erased, replaced by a blank screen. She checked the cloud. Nothing. She asked it to recover them. The technician told her they were likely deleted manually. "Maybe someone used your login." Her breath caught. Her password wasn't easy. Someone had been inside her digital space, just like they'd invaded her classroom. Her peace, her dignity. "Do you have any enemies?" the IT guy asked, half joking. Eva just smiled without smiling. Not yet. That afternoon she walked into the hallway to overhear two students behind the water fountain. "She's gonna crack just like the last one," a boy whispered. A girl giggled. "I'll give her 2 more weeks." Eva's stomach turned cold. She stepped into view. Both students snapped upright. Their eyes widened. Not with fear but with thrill. She looked them over, then walked past without a word. But her mind spiraled. The last one? Who was the last one? She rushed to the archives that evening. The staff records weren't public, but she found a yearbook from 3 years ago in the library's back room. Flipping through it, she found a photo of the English department. Another black woman, Miss Angela Green, gone. No mention of retirement. No farewell page. No mention at all. Eva stared at her smile, one that looked familiar, full of hope, full of what Eva had brought with her too. And just like that, she knew this wasn't an isolated experience. It was a pattern. As Eva turned to leave the library, a voice called softly from the shadows between the stacks. They did it to her too. But she didn't fight back. "Are you going to?" The emergency board meeting began at exactly 3:30 p.m. in the high-ceilinged conference room near the superintendent's office. The walls were decorated with framed photos of award-winning students and smiling faculty. Ava's face nowhere among them. She wasn't invited. She sat alone in her classroom, the fluorescent lights humming faintly, her computer open to the school's show's intranet calendar. She watched as the meeting status shifted from scheduled to in progress. Inside that room, behind closed doors, her fate was being sculpted like clay, without her hands, her voice, or her side of the story. Behind those walls, the conversation took a darker turn. Principal Whitaker stood at the head of the table, suit neatly pressed, voice flat with feigned concern. "There's been a growing discomfort among the student body regarding Miss Johnson's presence, particularly since the video incident." One board member, Mr. Raymond Dean, frowned. "You mean the video where she cried during class?" "Not just that," Whitaker replied. "There's concern that her emotional state is becoming disruptive. Some parents feel she's scaring their children." Another board member, Mrs. Eliza Poole, tilted her head. "Scaring them how?" "She has a way of confronting students. Her tone, her intensity. It's made some kids feel unsafe." "Unsafe?" Poole repeated, raising an eyebrow. Whitaker nodded solemnly. "We're trying to be sensitive to all perspectives." Meanwhile, Ava sat at her desk, phone face down, notebook open. She stared at the words she'd scribbled hours earlier. "They're just figuring out how to spin it." She wanted to believe that voice was wrong, that there was still some semblance of justice waiting in the wings. But the silence from the admin office, the absence of a single email requesting her version of events, said otherwise. At 4:08 p.m. a single email landed in her inbox. Subject: follow-up. Recent classroom incident. It wasn't from the board. It wasn't from Principal Whitaker. It was from H. The next morning, Ava was called into the principal's office. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and laminated bureaucracy. Principal Whitaker folded his hands on the desk and forced a smile. "Miss Johnson, thank you for coming." Eva sat slowly, expression unreadable. "You said this was about the meeting?" Whitaker nodded. "After thorough discussion, the board has decided to issue a formal written warning regarding your conduct in the classroom." Eva blinked. "A warning? For the emotional outburst, and for the impact it's had on student comfort." "Student comfort," she echoed. Whitaker nodded again. "We understand this has been a difficult transition, but the emotional tenor you bring into the classroom can be overwhelming." She stared at him, the words hitting her like hail. "You mean the trauma I've endured? The slur carved into my desk? The edited video? The public humiliation?" Whitaker's voice didn't waver. "We're not disputing those events. But we have to look at how students perceive you, and unfortunately there's concern that your presence is becoming polarizing." Ava leaned forward. "So instead of addressing the students' racist behavior, you're disciplining me for reacting to it." Whitaker offered a half-hearted chuckle. "You're reading into it." "Am I?" He sighed. "Look, Ava, you're incredibly gifted, and we value diversity. But if you want to thrive here, you might consider softening your tone. Smile more. Appear less confrontational." There it was. Smile more. Less confrontational. Translation: be more palatable. More invisible. Less black. Ava left the office with a typed letter in her hand and fire in her chest. Her union representative, Mr. Halberts, walked beside her but said nothing. When they reached the end of the hall, Ava stopped. "You didn't say a word in there." Halberts looked down. "There wasn't much I could say. You're supposed to protect me." He sighed. "I'm supposed to protect your job. Sometimes that means knowing when to push back and when to absorb the blow." Ava blinked. Betrayed. "So I'm supposed to just take this, or risk them letting you go on a technicality?" He replied softly. "The climate's not in your favor right now." That evening, Ava sat at her kitchen table, the warning letter in front of her. She couldn't bring herself to read it again. Instead, she opened her laptop and began compiling everything. Photos, emails, copies of student work, her own journal entries. She created a file called "If I Disappear." It wasn't dramatic. It was preparation. But the story hadn't finished unraveling. It exploded. Around 8:47 p.m., Ava's phone buzzed. An unknown number had sent her a link. No message. She clicked it. Another video, unlisted, uploaded anonymously. She hit play. The screen filled with classroom footage, clearly recorded from a phone, the angle low, possibly hidden in a backpack. It showed her classroom. But this time, the footage wasn't cut or edited. It showed the truth. The video began with students surrounding her desk during homeroom. Logan, Trent, and two others taunting her. "Bet you can't go a day without crying," one said. Another chimed in. "Apologize for slavery, Miss Johnson. Maybe we'll forgive you." They laughed. She stood frozen, shocked. Her, "Get on your knees, Miss Johnson," Taylor said mockingly, camera now visible in her hand. "Come on, show us what allyship looks like." Eva's mouth moved but no words came. One boy stepped closer. "Do it or we say you hit us." That's when she knelt. Not out of submission but out of terror. Survival. The laughter erupted. She stood quickly. The moment passed, but it had been captured. Unfiltered. Unedited. Real. Ava's breath left her in one long sharp exhale. She watched the video again, then a third time. It wasn't her who looked unhinged. It was them. But this video hadn't gone public. Not yet. As she stared at the screen, a second message popped up from the unknown number. "They're planning to leak this next. Not to help you, to destroy you even worse." Ava stared at the message on her phone like it might vanish if she blinked too hard. "They're planning to leak this next. Not to help you, to destroy you even worse." Her hands trembled. Not with fear, at least not the same kind she felt before. This was something different. A cold clarity, the realization that every boundary she thought existed had been burned, that this game, this performance was still unfolding, but the audience didn't know the truth. They never had. She hit play again. The video's quality was grainy, but its content couldn't be more vivid. The students were clearly visible, their faces uncovered, their voices loud. This wasn't playful mischief. It was calculated degradation. "Bet you won't do it," Logan taunted, smirking. "It's a con, Miss Johnson. Prove you care. Apologize. For slavery," Taylor added, almost sweetly, like a child asking for candy. "Just say sorry. We'll forgive you." Ava's figure in the video was visibly shaken. Silent, torn between standing her ground and surviving the moment. Another voice emerged. Dylan, tall and smug, moving closer. "Do it, or I'll say you hit me. Easy suspension. Maybe jail."
That was the switch.
On screen, Ava froze. The whole class silent, waiting. She glanced toward the classroom door. No one was coming. No one had her back. And slowly, like her bones refused to move but her instincts overruled them, she sank to her knees. Just for a second. Just long enough. The room erupted in laughter. Ava hit pause. She couldn't watch anymore. Not now. She stood in her living room, the silence around her thudding like a heartbeat. They had won, hadn't they? Not just in the classroom. Not with the school board, but in the court of public perception. They hadn't just targeted her. They had choreographed her collapse. Designed it. Broadcast it. And now they were preparing to humiliate her all over again. And, the worst part, they would pretend it was activism. Just students exposing a radical teacher who couldn't handle her job. She thought back to Kiara. Her voice. That warning. They're planning something. And she had been right. Eva sat down and opened her laptop. This time, not to document, not to defend, but to prepare. She downloaded the video. Made copies. stored them on encrypted drives, uploaded one to a private server. This wasn't panic, it was strategy. Then she opened a blank Word document and titled it, "When They Show the Kneeling." She began to write her side, her version. Every moment, every word, every threat. She wasn't sure who would read it. She just knew she couldn't let them control the story. By the following Monday, the video had leaked. It didn't come from a student account. It came from an anonymous page called Truth in Classrooms. The caption read, "Woke teacher finally breaks under pressure, forced to kneel for her crimes." The video spread like wildfire. Not just in the school, not just in the town, but statewide. Soon, Kneel Teacher was trending on Twitter. People debated in comment threads, podcasts, morning shows. She shouldn't have cracked. Weak leadership. Why is she even teaching history if she's this biased? See? They're making white kids feel guilty now. That's not education. And worse, screenshots circulated of Ava's face mid-meal, frozen in fear, stripped of her dignity, turned into a meme. They mocked her posture, her silence, her clothes, her skin. No one asked why she knelt. They just replayed the fact that she did. Back at Sterling Heights, Ava's desk remained untouched. She hadn't been suspended yet, but the board placed her on administrative review. The halls buzzed with whispers. Other teachers avoided eye contact. Students stared openly, some with pity, others with pride, like they'd been part of a viral prank. And through it all, Ava moved like a ghost. Present, but hollowed. Breathing, but not living. Then the media came. It started with phone calls, then emails, then the vans parked outside the school. One morning, as Ava approached the building, a reporter with perfect hair called out, "Ms. Johnson, do you believe in making children apologize for slavery?" She froze. That was the question? Not, were you coerced, or do you feel safe, or is this racially motivated? But that, she didn't answer. She walked straight inside. Inside the staff lounge, Mrs. Klein was scrolling through her phone, smirking. "You're practically famous," she said. "You should start a TikTok." Ava didn't reply. "Relax," Klein added. "They're kids. They were probably just playing around. You took it too seriously." "They threatened to accuse me of assault," Ava said flatly. Klein shrugged. "Well, did you touch anyone?" Ava blinked. "You think that's the point?" Klein rolled her eyes. "You make everything about race. Maybe that's the issue." Ava stepped back, something sharp rising in her throat. Not tears this time. Something closer to resolve. She left the room without a word. That afternoon, as she sat at her desk with the blinds closed, her inbox pinged. An email from a major local news outlet. Subject urgent. Request for comment. Teacher kneeling incident. Ava hesitated, then opened it. The email was brief. "We're preparing an expose on classroom bias and political overreach. Your video has sparked statewide concern. Would you like to offer a statement before our story airs tonight?" She scrolled to the bottom. Attached was the preview of the article's title. "When woke goes too far. Teacher forces own shame ritual in class." Her hands went numb. She hadn't said a word to them. But the framing was already locked. She was already guilty. Already a symbol. Just as Ava hovered over the delete button, a new email arrived. This one from a burner account. Subject: "They know this isn't the first time. Look into Ms. Angela Green." Ava didn't sleep the night the news segment aired. She didn't need to. The headline had already told her everything she needed to know. She was no longer a teacher, no longer a person with context or humanity. She was a story now, a cautionary tale about wokeness. A soundbite in the culture war. Her phone didn't stop buzzing. Text, emails, calls. Most from reporters or strangers demanding answers to questions she never invited. Others were crueler, filled with threats disguised as opinions. But Ava stayed silent. Not because she wanted to, because her lawyer told her she had to. "Don't engage with them," the voice on the other end of the call had said. "Anything you say could be twisted. You're in the middle of a reputational firestorm. Let it burn out." "I'm not a forest," she replied. "I'm a person." "I know, but right now, you're also a liability." The word hung in the air. Liability. That's what she had become, too controversial to defend. Too black to be neutral. Too honest to be safe. By the following Monday, the suspension email came through. Subject: administrative leave. Pending investigation. Status unpaid. The wording was cold, precise, clinical. They had not fired her. Not yet. But they had removed her. From the classroom. From the building. From her students. No hearing. No questions. No one asked how it felt to kneel in fear while laughter echoed around her. The school's statement to the press was brief. We are committed to creating a learning environment that serves all students. At this time, Miss Ava Johnson has been placed on leave, as we review the circumstances of the recent classroom incident. They made it sound mutual, as if she had agreed. Online, the story bloomed like a poisonous flower. One petition, "Remove Ava Johnson from Sterling Heights," reached over 8,000 signatures in 24 hours. The comment section read like a graveyard of empathy. She doesn't belong in a school with kids. This is what you get when you let activism into the classroom. If she's this emotional, imagine what she teaches them behind closed doors. Reverse racism is still racism. A counter-petition launched in her defense struggled to cross a few hundred signatures. She wasn't surprised. She had always known that silence had more power when wielded by the privileged. The silence followed her home. Her once quiet neighborhood now felt like a soundstage. Curtains twitched when she walked by. The woman across the street who once complimented her garden crossed to the other side without waving. Her local grocery store cashier, who used to chat about recipes, rang up her items with eyes downcast and lips pressed tight. Even the mail carrier stopped smiling. The only thing that grew at her doorstep now was the pile inside her mailbox. Envelopes filled with scrawled handwriting, no return address. Some typed, others torn. The contents were as vicious as they were predictable. "You're what's wrong with this country. Go kneel somewhere else. Bet you won't cry in prison." She burned the first few, but they kept coming. So she started saving them. One by one. Labeled, dated, evidence. She rarely left the house now. Not because she was afraid of being recognized. She already had been. Not because she was ashamed. She refused to be. But because she understood something crucial. Her silence wasn't just being imposed on her. It was being used against her. In her absence, the narrative solidified. Every day she didn't speak, the public shaped her story for her. They called it guilt, embarrassment, admission. But in truth, she was collecting, watching,
preparing.
Her silence wasn't surrender. It was ammunition. Late one night, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop and reread the anonymous email that had arrived just after the video leaked. Subject: "They know this isn't the first time. Look into Ms. Angela Green." It was unsigned. No clue who sent it. Just a single name. She searched the school's archives. No hits. No yearbook listings past. Then she found an article buried on a parenting blog. The headline: "When Teachers Vanish, One Parent's Fight to Get Answers." The article chronicled a Black English teacher at Sterling Heights who had abruptly resigned after allegations of classroom disorder. No statement, no interviews. Just gone. The parent, who remained unnamed, claimed the school refused to provide records. No one had seen Angela Green since. Ava stared at the screen, heart racing. This was a pattern, and she was its next chapter. The next morning, another email appeared in her inbox. Subject: Ava Johnson. Ongoing board review. But the sender wasn't HR. It was someone named info@secure.du@protonmail.com. There was no greeting, no signature, just one line. "Logan Trent's father sits on the school board." She read it 3 times. Her skin prickled. The boy who told her to kneel, whose face was all over the viral video, his father helped vote on her suspension. No disclosure, no recusal, just quiet influence, wrapped in power. The silence wasn't just around her. It was orchestrated. She cross-referenced the board members' names with the parent registry. There it was. Raymond Trent, school board treasurer, Logan's father. The same man who had sat in the meeting that led to her public shaming. The same man who publicly claimed he cared about student protection. She sat back in her chair. This wasn't just systemic racism. It was personal. They weren't just covering for students. They were covering for each other. Ava forwarded the email to her lawyer. Minutes later, her phone rang. Her lawyer's voice was sharp, urgent. "Ava, we need to talk off the record. This changes everything." The call with Ava's lawyer had ended in silence. Not the heavy, helpless silence she'd been enduring for weeks, but something sharper, more deliberate. A silence filled with plans forming beneath the surface. But before Ava could digest what off the record really meant, something unexpected happened. Someone else spoke up. Dana Riley wasn't the kind of parent the Sterling Heights administration feared, until she gave them a reason to. She had lived in the community for 8 years, white, middle-class, divorced, worked in communications for a local nonprofit. She wore yoga pants to grocery stores and brought gluten-free cupcakes to school fundraisers. And she had a biracial son named Micah. Micah was 12, quiet but curious. He loved science, skateboarding, and Marvel comics. But more than anything, he loved Ms. Johnson's class. "She gets me," he once told his mother, face glowing. "She doesn't treat me like I'm the problem." That had been 2 months ago, before everything went wrong. Dana hadn't said anything publicly at first. She watched from the sidelines like everyone else, reading the headlines, hearing the gossip in the carpool line, scrolling through the comments under the video that played on every local news channel. But it was Micah's silence that shook her. He didn't smile anymore, didn't talk about school, didn't even ask about his comic subscription that was late. One evening, she found him sitting in bed, staring at a blank page in his notebook. "Wanna talk?" she asked. He shook his head, then whispered, "They made her kneel, Mom, and no one did anything." Dana felt her chest tighten. She knelt down beside him. "You saw it happen?" He nodded. "They told her to say sorry. One of them said he'd lie if she didn't. So, she did it. Just for a second. But they all laughed." Dana reached out, brushing his curls from his forehead. "Why didn't you tell me?"
I thought I'd get in trouble, or make it worse.
That's when Dana knew. Staying silent wasn't just cowardly now, it was complicity. The next day, she started writing. Her post began as a Facebook message on her personal page. "I never thought I'd be that mom, the one who speaks up against a school I've trusted for years. But silence has a cost, and this time it's too high." Then she told Micah's story, his love for learning, his joy in Ava's classroom, the quiet devastation he'd carried home since watching his teacher be humiliated by his peers, and then punished by adults who should have known better. She included no names, just truth. It didn't stay small. By the next morning, the post had been shared over 1,000 times. Local news outlets reposted screenshots. Advocacy pages picked it up. The headline shifted. "White mother breaks silence on viral Neil teacher scandal." And just like that, the narrative cracked. For the first time, Ava wasn't the villain. She was the victim someone believed. Dana didn't stop there. She gave a live interview outside the school gates. Her voice shook, but her words were fire. "I sent my son to Sterling Heights believing he'd be safe, that he'd be seen. But what I've learned is that this school isn't just broken. It's protected by people who want it to stay broken. Ms. Johnson is the bravest person I've ever met. And what's happening to her? That's not education, that's erasure." The clip went viral in under an hour. Parents began speaking up anonymously in the comments. "I pulled my daughter last year, after her black teacher suddenly resigned. We were told not to stir the pot when our son reported a slur in class. Now it all makes sense." The cracks became fissures. Ava watched it all from her living room, curled on the couch, knees tucked under her chin. She hadn't cried in days, but her throat tightened now, not from sadness but from something closer to recognition. She had been invisible for so long, she forgot what it felt like to be seen. Her inbox, once filled with hate, began to shift. Slowly at first. A trickle. "I see you, Ava. I believe you. I'm so sorry. Thank you for enduring what so many of us couldn't." Former students wrote. Even a few teachers from other districts. A black principal from Chicago. A woman in New York, whose mother had been a teacher in the South. Her story was no longer just hers. It was a spark. And then, the twist. An email landed in Ava's inbox. Subject line blank. Sender anonymous. No message. Just an attachment. A scanned letter, dated 4 years ago. Sterling Heights Middle School letterhead. Recipient, Ms. Angela Green. "Due to recent complaints regarding classroom culture, we've decided to reassign your responsibilities and advise a leave of absence. This is not a termination, but a mutual agreement for the best interests of our students." Scrawled in pen across the bottom. "They'll come for you too. Age." Ava's hands shook as she read it. Attached was a second file. A voicemail transcript. Digitally typed out. It was from Angela Green. It read, "If you're reading this, they've probably found a way to silence you. Don't let them. I left because I thought it would stop the pain. But it didn't. I let them erase me. You can't. Not again." The final line. "They did this to me too." Ava stared at the screen, her heart racing, when her doorbell rang. She stood cautiously, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. Standing on the porch, holding a manila folder, was a woman she didn't recognize. She knocked once more and said, "I used to teach at Sterling too. I have something you need to see." The woman on Ava's porch introduced herself simply. "Janelle Booker," she said, handing Ava the manila folder like it was made of glass. "English Department, Sterling Heights, 2000s. Ava hesitated before opening the door wider. "Come in." Inside, they sat across from each other at the dining table. Ava's living room still buzzed with the aftershocks of Dana Riley's viral video. But this was something different. It wasn't public. It wasn't digital. It was buried truth, clawing its way back to the surface. Janelle's hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I thought I imagined it all. I thought maybe I was the problem. Until I saw your story. And then I remembered. This isn't new. You're just the next one." The folder Janelle brought contained copies of formal reprimands, unsigned letters, HR memos, all surrounding her final year at Sterling Heights. One claimed she instigated discomfort in students when discussing racial dynamics. Another referenced a pattern of emotional instability after she reported students mocking her accent and afro-textured hair. The language was eerily familiar. Professional. Sanitized. Weaponized. "There was never a hearing," Janelle said. "No one ever asked me what happened. I was told I could resign quietly or face public accusations that would harm my future opportunities." Eva listened, heart sinking. "They used my dignity as leverage," Janelle whispered. "And I let them." But Ava wouldn't. She couldn't. Fueled by what she now knew was a legacy of silent erasure, Ava began digging. She and Dana pored over digital archives, FOIA requests, and years of school board minutes. The deeper they went, the more insidious the pattern became. Every 3 to 4 years, a black faculty member at Sterling Heights quietly left under mysterious circumstances. No press releases, no retirement ceremonies, no official grievances filed. Just gone. Disappeared. Like Angela Green. Like Janelle Booker. And now, almost, Ava Johnson. The metaphor began to take physical form on Ava's kitchen table. She printed every document, every email, every news article, and stacked them in manila folders, each labeled with a name. The files towered higher each day, creeping toward the fruit bowl, overtaking the placemats, threatening to replace what used to be a space for Sunday breakfasts and lesson planning. There was no fruit in the bowl now, only the bitter pulp of injustice. Dana brought coffee most mornings. She worked the printer like a detective, tracking old articles, calling former parents under the guise of educational outreach, and connecting the dots. "This wasn't just neglect," she said one morning, thumbing through an HR report. "This was design. They created a system where black excellence becomes the threat, and then they crush it quietly so no one notices the blood." They discovered a particularly telling pattern. Most of the removed black teachers were marked as having interpersonal issues or being misaligned with school culture. One had filed a complaint after being asked if she was more of a Beyoncé or a Michelle Obama in the classroom. Another was accused of being too intense after teaching a unit on Malcolm X. None were fired outright. All were erased. Eva took photos of the files, scanning and uploading them to an encrypted cloud drive titled Erasure Dossier, Sterling Heights. They weren't alone for long. Word of Ava's research leaked through private Facebook groups and group chats. Quiet allies began to whisper. A black guidance counselor from a neighboring school sent over a file marked confidential. A teacher from as far as Florida messaged Ava, saying she remembered attending a PD seminar years ago where Sterling Heights was praised for cleaning house. The seminar leader had referred to it as a culture reset. That phrase came up again in an internal memo Ava found. The board president Raymond Trent, Logan's father, had once written, "We need another culture reset to align the staff with our parental values." It was dated just 2 months before Ava was hired. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. An email from a burner account. Subject: retired principal, willing to talk, but only in person. The body of the message gave no details, except a meeting time and location, a nearby library study room, at noon the next day. Eva forwarded it to her lawyer and Dana. "If I don't come back, you know where to start," they joked, half-heartedly. But beneath the humor was unease. The next day, Eva arrived at the library with 2 printed copies of her compiled dossier and a list of prepared questions. The room reserved was small, windowless, tucked in the corner like a confession booth. She waited. 5 minutes passed. 10, 15. She checked her watch, then her phone. Nothing. At 12:28 p.m., she texted Dana. "He's late." Dana replied instantly. "Be careful. Want me to come?" Eva was about to answer when her email pinged. A new message. Subject: do not meet. Body: he's gone. You won't find him. And neither will anyone else. Her heart thudded. She replied, "What do you mean gone?" No answer. She searched the name again, the ex-principal she'd been told about, who served from 2003 to 2009, rumored to have resigned after a personnel scandal. She tried calling his listed number. Disconnected. She found a Reddit thread mentioning a missing former administrator in a local education forum. The post was vague, unverified. She checked Google Alerts. Nothing. He had vanished. Eva left the library slowly, the weight of the manila folder in her hand suddenly heavier. The man who had agreed to testify to reveal how the system worked from the inside was no longer reachable. Whether by fear, force, or something else entirely, he had been removed from the board. Just like the teachers. Just like the truth. As Eva stepped back into her car, her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, a voicemail. She pressed play, and a trembling voice whispered, "They've been watching you, Eva. You're not just exposing them. You're next." Eva didn't sleep the night after the voicemail. She played it on loop, trying to match the voice to someone she knew. Mel. Mid-40s maybe. Breathy. The way the words trembled. "You're not just exposing them. Your next" sounded less like a threat and more like a warning. One that came too late. The silence after it ended felt louder than ever. At 3:17 a.m. she sat in her kitchen, surrounded by the stacks of manila folders, the erasure dossier, trying to calculate how many more layers she was about to uncover, how much more of herself she'd lose in the process. The call from Sterling's HR department came that afternoon. "We'd like to discuss a resolution," the voice on the line said. Eva raised an eyebrow. "What kind of resolution?" "A mutual agreement," the woman responded, voice too chipper to be sincere. "A way to bring closure to this situation and allow everyone to move forward without further disruption." Eva didn't respond. "We'd like to meet in person," the woman added. Eva gave a quiet nod, though the woman couldn't see it. "Send the details to my lawyer." The meeting was held in a quiet corner of a downtown office building. Not at the school. Not at the district headquarters. This meeting, Eva realized, wasn't meant to exist in any official space. Her lawyer, Denise Corwin, sat beside her in a charcoal gray blazer and red lipstick that looked more like war paint than makeup. Across the table sat Principal Whitaker, a district attorney, and a woman in a pantsuit who introduced herself only as a representative from the board's legal affairs team. The woman slid a crisp white envelope across the table. Inside, a typed agreement and a check. 100. Eva didn't blink. The woman spoke as if rehearsing from a script. "The board recognizes the challenges Ms. Johnson has faced and appreciates her commitment to educational excellence. In the interest of resolving this matter, we're prepared to offer a career transition bonus." Ava's voice was ice. "A what?" The woman smiled faintly. "It's not a settlement. There's no admission of wrongdoing. Just support for your next chapter. We're also willing to assist with job placement in a new district." Denise glanced at the papers. "There's an NDA clause." Of course there was. The woman nodded. "Standard confidentiality language. Mutual silence protects both parties. Or just yours," Ava said. Whitaker cleared his throat. "Eva, we really do wish you well. But this entire thing has escalated beyond anyone's control. A clean break would let everyone heal." "Heal?" She almost laughed. She looked down at the check again. The number stared back. Tempting. Silent. Suffocating. Outside the office, Denise stopped her. "That's more than I thought they'd offer. We could push for more, but it's risky. If this drags out, if the media spins it again, you could walk away with nothing." Eva didn't answer. Denise's voice softened. "I'm on your side, but I also want you to have options. This, it gives you space, security, power to start again. Start again." But she hadn't finished here. Not yet. That night, Eva sat on her porch with the check in one hand and Angela Green's letter in the other. The math was simple. $150,000 was enough to pay off her student loans, move cities, start over. It was also enough to buy her silence, to make her disappear like the others. The wind rustled the papers. The moon watched quietly. Inside, her voicemail blinked again. Another anonymous message. "Don't take it. They're scared." That's why they're paying. His voice was younger. Female. Confident. She didn't know who it was. She didn't care. She just knew they were right. The next morning, Ava stood over her kitchen trash can, holding the check. Her hand hovered. For a second, she imagined what it might feel like to take it, to walk away, to vanish from this place, with a cushion of cash and a carefully erased name. But then she looked at her kitchen table. The stacks of erased lives. Angela, Janelle, herself. All of them traded dignity for silence. Ava wasn't ready to be next. She ripped the check in half, then into quarters, then again and again until it was confetti. She dropped it into the trash without ceremony. Then she reached for her phone. Denise answered on the second ring. You okay? No, Ava said. But I know what I'm doing now. I hope that means something other than burning down the district. Ava smiled grimly. Not yet. I assume you're not taking the check. It's in the trash. A beat of silence. Then Denise said, then we go forward, on your terms. What do you want to do next? Ava walked to her window and stared out at the street. At the school banners still hanging from porches, at the silence still choking the air. I want to be heard, she said. By everyone. That afternoon, she called a local community organizer she'd met through Dana's advocacy circle. A former student of hers, now working in media, offered to handle the PR. Within hours, they secured a venue, a small auditorium at the downtown Civic Center. The press release went out that evening. Evia Johnson to speak publicly for the first time. Tuesday 10. What they did. What I saw. What I refused to let die. It wasn't just an event. It was the moment she reclaimed her voice. As Ava drafted her speech in the early morning silence, her inbox pinged. A single new message. Subject: you should know, someone's trying to stop your press conference. Check the permit office. The email about the permit landed like a siren in Ava's inbox. You should know, someone's trying to stop your press conference. Check the permit office. At first she thought it was paranoia, another whisper in a storm of veiled threats and careful silences. But after weeks of watching the truth be buried, spun and sold, she'd learned not to ignore warning signs, especially anonymous ones. She called the Civic Center. A young man answered. Hi, yes, Ava said evenly. I'm confirming the press conference scheduled under my name for tomorrow morning. A pause. The shuffle of papers. Oh, he said hesitantly. I think there's been a delay. Someone flagged it for review this morning. Noise concerns, I believe. Possibly a reschedule. Ava closed her eyes. There it was. Again. Tell whoever filed that complaint, she said quietly. They're about 12 years too late to stop my voice. And she hung up. Dana came over that evening, with sandwiches neither of them touched. Ava's small living room had turned into a command center. Speech drafts, timelines, receipts, and a flash drive labeled Final Truth stacked on every surface. This still happening? Dana asked, tension tight in her voice. Even if I have to stand in the parking lot with a megaphone, Ava replied. She wasn't bluffing. She'd spent weeks being forced to kneel, to hide, to shrink. But not tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd stand, and let the world see who tried to silence her. The next morning, Ava arrived an hour early. The venue was still available. The complaint had been dismissed once Ava's legal team got involved. Denise stood at the edge of the stage, arms folded, watching the tech crew prepare the live stream. You've got 24 minutes, she said, before it starts trending. Ava stood center stage, breathing in the stillness. Her hands clutched the microphone, and her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of truth finally given permission to rise. At exactly 10:02 a.m., the stream went live.
No countdown.
No music, just Ava, standing beneath a single spotlight, and the world watching. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. Not from nerves, from memory. I was told to kneel by children who were taught to hate by silence. She let the words hang, then continued, raw, honest, unrehearsed. I was humiliated in my own classroom. Filmed, mocked, forced to become a meme, because I didn't perform strength the way they expected, a black woman should. She named the students. She named the parents. She named the board member who watched his son bully her, and said nothing. She listed dates, documents, policies, violations in the growing file of silenced educators who came before her. She quoted Angela Green's final note. Don't let them erase you. She paused after that. Let the air carry it. I won't, she whispered. By the 10th minute, the stream cracked 30. By the 20th, 70. Comments flooded in. She's not just a teacher. She's a mirror. I see my mother in her. How did this happen in The hashtag shifted. What once trended as Neil teacher now surged as Sand with Ava. People reposted her quotes over images of classroom chalkboards, over maps, over protest posters. Her face, once ridiculed and frozen mid-kneel, was now reshared with a different frame, standing strong, tears glistening, eyes steady. A teacher, a survivor, a force. Ava didn't smile. Not during the speech, not even at the end. She simply looked into the camera and said, "You don't get to bury me with silence. I choose my voice." And the feed cut to black. Within an hour, every major media outlet had picked it up. TV networks interrupted coverage. Podcasts pivoted their episodes. TikTok creators made montages with her quotes. Civil rights groups issued statements of solidarity. Even celebrities tweeted in support. Her inbox exploded. And then just as she returned home, phone nearly dead, voice hoarse, a call came in. Blocked. Number. She hesitated. Answered. "Miss Johnson?" A calm, warm voice said. "This is Simone Elridge. I'm lead counsel at the American Civil Rights Justice Fund. We saw your speech." Ava sat slowly on her couch. "I just want to say," Simone continued, "you didn't just take a stand, you cracked something open. And we'd like to help you take it the rest of the way." Ava didn't speak. "Miss Johnson, what was done to you wasn't just immoral. It was illegal, systematic, documented, and now, public." Simone paused. "If you're ready, we'd like to launch a civil action on your behalf, against the school, the district, the board, and every party responsible for burying the truth." Ava stared at the floor, eyes locked on the shadow of the torn check still faintly visible in the trash. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Yes." Simone paused. Then said, "Then there's one more thing. You're not the only teacher we're representing. Another one just came forward, with a recording you need to hear." The recording Simone Elridge mentioned was short, only 90 seconds, but Ava felt every second like a hammer to the chest. It was a secretly captured staff development meeting from 3 years prior, submitted anonymously by a former faculty member who had finally come forward after seeing Ava's speech. The audio was grainy but unmistakable. A male voice laughing. "We lost another one. That makes 3 this year. Guess they can't handle a little pressure." A woman's voice chimed in. "Or maybe we're just too high achieving for them. Some folks don't fit the culture." The man again, sarcastically. "We're not breaking them. They're breaking themselves." Laughter. No one objected. No one corrected. No one said a word in defense of the teachers they were clearly mocking. Ava felt her hands clench involuntarily. It was the same culture of silence, of complicity, dressed in corporate language and friendly smiles. But now it had a voice. Now it had proof. Within 48 hours of Ava's speech going viral, Simone and her team filed a formal lawsuit with the Civil Rights Commission and the State Labor Board. The case listed Sterling Heights Middle School, the school board, specific administrators, and controversially, 3 named students and their parents, including Logan Trent. Simone explained the decision carefully. "These aren't just students who acted out," she said during their legal briefing. "These are minors whose behavior directly reflected the climate and entitlement fostered by adults in power. They weren't anomalies. They were legacies." Ava nodded, her resolve unwavering. She wasn't just seeking compensation. She was demanding accountability. The filing shook the district like a seismic wave. News anchors debated the implications of suing minors. Editorials questioned if Sterling Heights would survive the reputational fallout. The superintendent issued a tight-lipped statement. "We take these allegations seriously and are cooperating with all inquiries. We remain committed to maintaining a safe and inclusive environment." But privately, damage control consumed the board. Parents who once laughed in online comment sections were now hiring attorneys. The Trents, in particular, went silent. Logan was pulled from school for private medical leave. Rumors swirled that the family was preparing to relocate. Ava didn't care about their exit strategy. She cared about what was exposed. Depositions began within weeks. One by one, faculty and staff were questioned under oath. Some deflected. Others lied. A few cracked. The most disturbing came from a former PE teacher, Mr. Ellis, who resigned the year Ava was hired. When asked if the culture at Sterling Heights was racially charged, he laughed nervously and said, "It was never about race. It was about fit. And honestly, some people just couldn't keep up." Simone leaned forward. Did you ever hear derogatory jokes or commentary about black staff members? He hesitated, then said quietly, yeah, but they weren't meant seriously. Simone opened a transcript. You said, and I quote, she'll fold like the last one. Watch by spring she'll be gone. That was in reference to Ms. Ava Johnson, correct? He didn't answer. The silence said everything. Then came the leak. A freshman student, anonymous online, uploaded images of a handwritten diary she claimed belonged to her older sister, a former Sterling Heights student. The entries were shocking. They have this game, the 8th grade boys. Every year they try to see how fast they can get a black teacher to quit. They said it's called the melt. Like watching someone melt under pressure. They joke about it in the locker room. Logan is the worst. He calls himself HR because he decides who stays and who goes. The post went viral overnight. The melt trended within hours. Even national figures began weighing in. Teachers across the country shared their own versions of similar games. The melt wasn't unique. It was just finally exposed. Ava sat in her living room, knees pulled to her chest, watching the world catch up to what she'd known for years. They knew, she whispered to Dana. They always knew. Dana nodded. They did, and they didn't care. The school board went into emergency session the next day. They couldn't contain the fire anymore. Journalists were now camped outside the school. Parents protested daily at the front gates. National advocacy groups descended on the town with demands for resignations and reform. Sterling Heights was no longer a school. It was a case study in systemic racism. Then the twist no one saw coming. The state attorney general's office announced a full-scale investigation into the district. Not just the school, the entire district. The statement was concise but devastating. Based on credible allegations and mounting evidence, our office is launching a formal inquiry into patterns of racial discrimination, suppression of educator rights, and administrative misconduct within the Sterling Heights School District. This includes past personnel decisions, record handling, and possible civil rights violations. Eva's jaw tightened when she read it. Finally, this wasn't just her fight. It was official. It was public. And it was just beginning. That evening, as Ava prepared to rest, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. They're going to offer a settlement. A big one. But they'll want your silence again. This time it'll come from someone you trust. The courtroom smelled of cold air conditioning and tension. By the time the trial opened, Ava's name had already been etched into national discourse. Not as a trending topic this time, but as a civil rights plaintiff in a case the media dubbed the Sterling Heights suppression. Outside, protesters stood with hand-painted signs, "Justice for Ava, dismantled and melt. Teachers deserve protection, not persecution." Inside, the room pulsed with silence. Ava sat at the plaintiff's table between Simone and Denise. Her palms were cool against her skirt, but her breath stayed steady. She was not the woman who had been forced to kneel. She was not the teacher who had been told to smile more. She was the one who survived. And now she would speak. The courtroom was filled with spectators, journalists, educators, even former students. Cameras were barred, but that didn't stop sketches and minute-by-minute live blogs from painting the trial across every news feed in America. The defense team, hired by the district, came equipped with corporate polish and subtle cruelty. Their lead counsel, Martin Clemens, was a man known for turning civil rights cases into personality critiques. Day 1 was procedural. Day 2 brought the first witness, Ava. She stood, raised her hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then, with the quiet dignity of someone who had already been publicly torn apart, she took the stand. Simone began the questioning gently. "Miss Johnson, can you tell the court what happened on the day the video was recorded?" Ava nodded. Her voice did not waver. "I was surrounded. I was mocked, threatened. And in that moment, I made a decision to survive, not to fight." Simone stepped closer. "And why do you believe that video was weaponized?" "Because it didn't show context. It didn't show the years of erasure before it. It showed a moment of fear and framed it as weakness." The room was silent, except for the scribbling of pens. Simone held up Ava's teal notebook, evidence, and handed it to her. "Would you please read the entry from the day after the incident?" Ava opened to the marked page. She read, "I've never felt smaller, not because they mocked me, but because the silence in that room told me I didn't belong there. And worse, that no one intended to make space for me to belong." Even the judge blinked slowly. Then came the defense. Clemens rose, adjusting his tie as if preparing for a performance.
Miss Johnson, he began.
Would you agree that teaching is a high-pressure job? Yes. And would you also agree that children can be unkind? Yes. So isn't it possible that what happened was simply the result of typical middle school misbehavior, rather than systemic bias? Ava locked eyes with him. Systemic bias teaches misbehavior. They didn't invent cruelty. They absorbed it. Clemens paced, unfazed. You claim your experience was shaped by racism, but the district has no formal complaints from you prior to the video going public. Why? Ava's voice was low. Because I knew I wouldn't be believed. But how can the court believe you now? Clemens asked. Ava opened her notebook again and read a line that hadn't yet been shared. If I report it, I become the problem. If I stay quiet, I stay employed. If I speak, I am accused of being emotional. If I stay silent, I am accused of not advocating for myself. Either way, I am punished. The courtroom went still. Simone didn't need to object. Clemens simply sat down. Defeated, but the moment that cracked the case wide open came from an unlikely place. The witness stand was occupied by a student, Mia Turner. 14. Blonde. Previously silent, she sat stiffly, her parents behind her, eyes on the floor. Simone approached gently. Mia, you were in Miss Johnson's class the day of the video? She nodded. Did you see what happened? Yeah. Can you tell us? Mia took a breath. I laughed, she said. We all did. I didn't stop it. But I remember Logan said, watch, she'll crack like the rest. He said they'd been doing it for years, that it was tradition. Gasps rippled through the room. Simone nodded. And did anyone try to stop them? No, Mia whispered, but I wanted to. I just didn't know how. Her confession was the stone that shattered the glass. What had been alleged, documented, even whispered was now confessed under oath. A culture of bullying, a tradition of targeting, and an administration that looked away. By the end of the week, Ava's legal team had called over a dozen witnesses, former teachers, students, a retired janitor who testified that he'd been told not to get involved when he saw vandalism in black teachers' rooms. The jury watched closely, eyes narrowed, jaws tight. Even the judge, impartial by training, looked exhausted by the parade of pain. On the final day, Simone stood before the jury and held up the shredded check Ava had thrown away, the district's first attempt to buy her silence. She was offered this, Simone said. She could have walked away. But she didn't, because this isn't about revenge. It's about voice, about safety, about dignity. She knelt once, but she stood after that and made sure none of us would ever look at silence the same way again. As the courtroom adjourned for deliberation, Ava stepped outside for air. She stood on the courthouse steps, the wind catching her coat, cameras flashing in the distance. Reporters called her name. She didn't answer. She just breathed. In. Out. Alive. Unbowed. Inside, the jury foreperson slipped a sealed note to the bailiff. 1 hour passed.
Then 2.
As the sun dipped behind the courthouse, a court officer whispered to the judge. The jury split. It's closer than we thought. The jury deliberated for 18 hours. 18 hours of tension coiled around the courthouse like barbed wire. Ava stayed at a nearby hotel with Simone, Dana, and Denise. They ate little, slept less, and refreshed news updates every 15 minutes. The case had spread beyond the state. National anchors debated it nightly. Op-eds dissected its legal implications, and even international outlets picked up the story as a symbol of racial reckoning in American education. Still, Ava wasn't thinking about the cameras, or the columns. She was thinking about the girls who would walk into a classroom next year. Black, brilliant, and already calculating how much of themselves they'd have to hide just to survive. That's who this was for. When the call came, it was 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. The jury's reached a verdict, Simone said, lowering the phone. Eva felt the air leave the room. They drove in silence. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. Protesters, supporters, media vans, students. Every inch of sidewalk pulsed with anticipation. Inside, the courtroom was at capacity. Extra chairs were brought in. Security lined the back wall. The judge's expression was unreadable. Ava sat motionless, her teal notebook in her lap. The jury filed in. The foreperson, a black woman in her 40s, held the verdict envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. Has the jury reached a decision? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The envelope was passed forward. The judge opened it, read, then nodded. In the case of Ava Johnson versus Sterling Heights School District, we, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Some clapped before being silenced by the judge's gavel. Eva's hands trembled. But the foreperson wasn't done. We further award damages in the amount of $4.5 million, $2 million in compensatory damages and $2.5 million in punitive damages. Eva exhaled, a sound caught between relief and disbelief. Simone squeezed her shoulder, and the foreperson added, "We recommend a mandate for district-wide policy reforms, diversity training, external oversight of disciplinary action, and the public acknowledgement of wrongdoing." The courtroom erupted. Later that day, at a press conference, the district read an official apology. It was awkward, scripted, but legally binding. "We apologize to Ms. Ava Johnson for the failures that allowed her experience to unfold unchallenged. We commit to building a future where no educator faces the same." But it was the school board president's announcement that rippled louder than any prepared speech. Raymond Trent, father of Logan, stood at the podium with tired eyes and an empty expression. "I am resigning effective immediately," he said. "It is clear that my continued presence would impede the district's ability to move forward." He didn't mention his son. He didn't have to. Back in the courtroom, a more honest moment unfolded. As Ava stepped out of the judge's chambers, the hallway was lined with students, former and current. Many had tears in their eyes. Some held handmade signs. Others clutched flowers or notes. Kiara was there, standing with her mother. The same shy girl who had warned Ava weeks ago, now reached forward with trembling hands. "I'm sorry they did that to you," she whispered. "But I'm glad you didn't go away." Eva knelt, not in submission this time, but to meet her at eye level. "You made sure I didn't," she said softly. A single camera snapped the moment. It would become the photo featured on every major newspaper the next morning. Simone debriefed with Ava privately that night. "You did it," she said. "You changed the conversation."
Eva sat quietly, sipping tea. "No, we started the conversation."
"Well, now everyone's listening." Denise chimed in. "The money's yours. So is the national platform. People are already calling you the face of educational equity." Eva looked out the window. Across the street, a bus stop ad displayed her image beside the words, "She stood. Now we must." She turned back to them. "I'm not keeping the money," she said. They both stared. "What?" Ava placed her mug down gently. "I want every dollar to go toward building something. A school, a safe place, for students, for teachers, for the ones who never had the chance to fight back." The next day, she held her own press conference. "I'm grateful for the justice this court delivered," she said calmly, dressed in a navy blazer, her teal notebook in hand. "But justice isn't always enough. Justice can't undo humiliation. Justice can't rewrite trauma. Justice doesn't restore the careers lost before mine. So I'm using this settlement to create something new. A school, a sanctuary, a model for what education should be. Free from fear, rich in truth and unapologetically human." The audience was stunned. Reporters shouted questions. What will it be called? Where will it be built? Ava smiled faintly. "I'm calling it the Rising Place. Because we don't kneel here, we rise." As the crowd applauded, a reporter stepped forward with a final question. "Miss Johnson, now that you've won, what's your next move?"
Ava paused, then answered,
"I'm going back, to the very school that broke me." Gasps filled the room. The system, the announcement that Ava Johnson would return to Sterling Heights, not as a teacher but as a reformer, sent shockwaves across the education world. Offers had poured in from everywhere. Ivy League schools dangled six-figure consulting contracts. Publishers begged for book deals. Talk shows lined up interviews. Even political operatives called, hinting at possible runs for office. Ava turned them all down. "I didn't survive this to sit in studios and sign books," she told Simone. "I came here to build what they tried to destroy." And that's exactly what she did. Her vision became a blueprint. A community school founded on restoration, equity, and fearless truth-telling. A place where students of color didn't have to check parts of themselves at the door, and educators didn't teach through clenched teeth or silenced voices. She called it the Rising Place. Not a school in the traditional sense. This was more part learning center, part training ground, part healing hub. A refuge and a revolution stitched into one building. Funding came from her settlement, crowdsourced support, and partnerships with nonprofit education equity groups. Architects designed the space around light and openness. No locked teachers' lounges, no surveillance-heavy hallways, no colorless walls. Every classroom was named after a black educator who had been forced out, overlooked, or erased. And at the front entrance, a plaque read, "You are not here to shrink. You are here to rise." The first day the rising place opened, Ava arrived before sunrise. She unlocked the door herself, walked down the bright corridors lined with student art. In her office, spacious but simple, she placed a small framed glass case on the shelf. Inside it sat the broken shards of her old ceramic coffee mug. The one that once read hope. It was fractured, but it was visible. A reminder. Dana joined her as co-director, handling community outreach and programming. Simone occasionally held seminars on civil rights in education. Even Janelle Booker came back. This time not to teach, but to speak, mentor, and pour into the very space that had once erased her. They built a staff composed of educators who had left the system bruised but not broken, teachers of color, LGBTQ instructors, neurodivergent facilitators, and others the system once labeled too different. This time, difference was the qualification, not the disqualifier. The school's first class was small, just 60 students, but every child enrolled carried a story. There was Micah, Dana's son, now full of light again, volunteering in the tech lab. There was Kiora, who asked Ava if she could start a poetry club for kids like us. And there was Devon, a soft-spoken 7th grader, who on the second day of classes lingered behind after school. Ava was stacking papers when he stepped into her doorway. "Ms. Johnson?" he asked. She looked up, smiling. "Yes, Devon." He scratched his arm, eyes nervous. "I know what happened to you. I saw the videos, and I read the stuff you wrote." She waited. "I just wanted to say," he said softly, "I want to be like you." Ava's smile faltered, not from weakness but from the sheer weight of it. This moment. This full-circle breath. "You won't be," she said gently. "You'll be better." Months passed. The rising place was featured in Time, NPR, and The Atlantic. School districts across the country requested Ava's guidance. Legislators cited her model in debates on education reform. A documentary team followed the first year of the Academy's journey. But Ava stayed rooted. She taught one class a semester, literature and liberation. Every student wrote journals. Every lesson included space for reflection. And every single classroom began the day with the same words spoken aloud. "My voice matters. My story is enough. My presence is not permission. It is purpose." Back at Sterling Heights, things had changed, but not completely. The administration shuffled. Training protocols were overhauled. The state's oversight remained. Some teachers left. Others stayed and listened. The building had been repainted. The diversity committee restructured. There were efforts, but the real reckoning didn't come until a year later. A statue. The idea began with students. Kira and others launched a campaign titled "Remember Her Standing." They proposed a sculpture outside the very building where Ava had once been humiliated, this time showing her not on her knees, but standing tall, notebook in hand, eyes forward. The board approved it, reluctantly, publicly, and on a breezy fall afternoon, the statue was unveiled. Ava stood at the back of the crowd, arms folded, watching as middle schoolers spoke into microphones about courage, identity, and truth. Parents clapped, teachers wiped tears, and when the curtain dropped, revealing her likeness in bronze, it wasn't perfection they saw. It was power carved in pain. A woman who had once been forced to kneel, now stood permanently rooted in the place that tried to erase her. As the crowd thinned, a little girl, barely 8, ran up to Ava, tugging her sleeve. "You're the lady from the statue," she squealed. Ava knelt, smiling. "I guess I am. My mom said you used to be a teacher, but then you got brave."
Eva chuckled. "I was always brave. I just had to stop hiding it."
The girl nodded, then leaned in close. "One day I'm gonna have a statue too." Ava smiled wider. "You won't need one. You'll write your own history." As Ava walked back toward her car, phone buzzing with interview requests and speaking invitations, she opened a new email. Subject urgent, whistleblower report, another district, same pattern. The message read, "You don't know me, but it's happening again. Just like what they did to you. Only this time, the teacher didn't survive it." Ava stared at the screen, and without hesitation she replied, "Send me everything." They tried to silence her, But her story screamed louder than their lies.
If you've ever been overlooked, erased, or told to calm down when you spoke your truth, this fight is yours too.
Justice doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts when we refuse to look away. Type yes if her story mattered to you. Subscribe if this broke your heart.